Have you ever heard of something called Ragbrai? If you're not from Iowa, then you probably haven't. I wouldn't expect you to know it. I am an Iowan from birth. And Ragbrai, I won't tell you what this whole long acronym stands for, but it's really a bicycle ride across the entire state of Iowa. And in case you don't know your geography, Iowa is actually bordered by two rivers. So the bike ride works like this. On Sunday morning, you dip the rear tire of your bicycle in the Missouri River. And then you pedal across the state of Iowa for 7 days. And on Saturday, when you make it to the end, you get to dip the front tire of your bike in the Mississippi. It's pretty cool. It's usually between 450 and 500 miles in a week. So you do like 70 or 80 miles a day. So I did this Ragbrai bike ride, and usually about 10,000 people do it a year. I did it 4 years in a row. This was back in my high school and college years, so I was in a little better shape back then. And it's beautiful. It's super cool. I know you don't picture Iowa as a beautiful place, but it is. It's got the rolling hills and although flat for a lot of it, which is good when you're on a bicycle. Beautiful, just cornfields and just beautiful skies you're driving through. Although this bike ride is always in late July, which it's about 95 degrees every day with 100% humidity, so it gets a little rough. But I loved doing it. By the way, as a side note, I always did the bike ride with my close friend, and he's an atheist. And so we'd have some awesome spiritual conversations on the ride. But I did it. It was a great time. I did learn the value, the miracle that is padded biking shorts, because yeah, you get pretty sore sitting on that bike seat for 70, 80 miles a day. It was about 8-9 hours a day. But no, it was great. You would think, by the way, that you lose a bunch of weight doing that much physical activity over a week. I think I actually put on pounds because there's incredible food the whole way. Picture on this bike ride, and there's lemonade stands out in front of every farm, except instead of just lemonade, it's a giant stand full of fresh steak and corn on the cob. And so you're just tempted to eat the whole way in between, and then you get to the towns to stay overnight, and they have incredible food there all night too. But anyway, the key to me being able to do this, though, by the way, so here's what's weird about it. I'm actually not a big biker. I wasn't a regular cyclist. I'd ride my bike around every once in a while as a teenager, but didn't do it. I'm not a marathon runner, not a long distance guy at all. I'm more kind of short distance sports and stuff like that. So I had to do some training. Training was key. My dad had an exercise bike, if you remember those, long before Peloton. Exercise bike in his office, and I would spend time on that every single day. I should have done more outdoor actual training rides. I only did a couple, so I could have done better training, but did quite a bit of training. Otherwise, I never would have made it through that. And you already know that if we want to do significant things in our lives or get really good at certain things, that it requires training. Any kind of sports, got to do training. Anything music related, got to do training. Anything business related takes training. And the same is true of our faith. How do we train for our faith? How do we train spiritually? How do you train your soul? I really want to talk about this because this year as Newbreak Church, one of the things we really want to help you do is engage more with Jesus. It's right there in our mission statement, connecting people to God. And we really want to help you engage deeper with Jesus. I don't know if you feel like you need more of that. I know I do. Especially the crazier and more chaotic and more stressful our country gets and our world gets. I know I just want to figure out how to engage better with Jesus, how to hear more from Jesus, how to experience Jesus better. So that's what we're talking about all month long to kick off this year. And if you tuned in online last week, you heard Pastor Robert really unpack that idea of engaging, or you can go back and watch it online if you missed it. But really, how we engage better with Jesus comes through training. Apostle Paul said that clearly to a young guy he was training, young guy Timothy. He says in 1 Timothy 4:7, train yourself to be godly. And so we can actually train ourselves to be godly. Believe it or not, we can actually train ourselves to think and feel and act more like Jesus. And all that training comes through engaging in spiritual practices, spiritual disciplines, as they're often called. I don't love discipline, but I like to practice things, so I like to call it spiritual practices. Notice, though, that Paul, what he says to Timothy is you must train yourself to be godly. He says train, not try harder. And I think sometimes when it comes to our Christian life or with religion, we really think I just got to try harder. Every Sunday, you're like, okay, this week I'm going to try harder to stay out of this sin. And then we fall back into it and we end up frustrated and giving up. So I want you to think about it, not just I got to try harder, but to train. And training is all about training wisely and training well. And so we train through spiritual practices. And, sometimes we think spiritual practices are just there's all going to be unpleasant. Honestly, sometimes physical training is like that, right? We're just going to be sweaty and exhausted at the end. And I think what's different about spiritual practices is they're actually very life-giving while you're practicing them. The other thing, sometimes we think spiritual disciplines or practices, it's only for the super spiritual people, but that's not true. It's for anyone that's a follower of Jesus. Sometimes we think it's a way to earn favor with God, but that's not true. Because of grace, as we talk about here all the time, we don't need to earn brownie points with God. Spiritual practices are actually made for us. They're for our benefit. They're not achievements. They're activities that help draw me closer to God. And no matter where you're at spiritually, listen, these are so important to you. If you're brand new to the faith, like I was new to cycling, then you definitely need these. Maybe you're saying, okay, so I'm in, I get Jesus now, but what do I do? What am I supposed to do in my Christian life? How does this thing work? How do I grow? You need these. They're important to you. If you're an experienced Jesus follower and you've been doing this for years, even decades, the key to you continuing to grow and not get stagnant and complacent, it's these spiritual practices. It's learning new ones, trying new ones. We're going to talk about several over the next few weeks, and so I hope maybe you'll learn some new ones. Even if you're someone who isn't sure yet what you even think about Jesus and this whole thing, these are really key for you, because you know what? Each one of these spiritual practices actually point us to Jesus, reveal more of what he's like and what he's about to us. So by practicing them, you just might get some of your questions answered. So we do our spiritual practices at first because they help us develop a relationship with God. And then as we grow closer to God, we're doing them because we do have a relationship with him and they help keep us close to him. I think about it like with dating. When I first met my wife and we're going on some dates. I took her to Pizza Hut because, I'm pretty cool like that. And we talked for like 3 hours because early on engaging in dating was all about just getting to know each other better and building a relationship. Now after we're married, the dating doesn't stop. I always remind people of that when I perform their wedding. Like, you got to keep dating because now the dating is because you have a relationship and it helps you continue to connect and even grow deeper. By the way, 2 books real quick I recommend about spiritual disciplines because I don't have time to go into all the depths and layers of them. So you can read more on your own. One is a classic called Celebration of Discipline by Richard Foster. And the other is a little newer, and we were reading it as a sermon team, called Soul Keeping by John Ortberg. So check it out. And maybe you hear this idea of spiritual practices and you're saying, all right, listen here, Pastor Boy, I don't need more stuff on my to-do list. I already got resolutions and goals and all these things. Now you're adding even more to my to-do list. Well, actually, I'm not going to add to your to-do list today. In fact, believe it or not, I'm going to take things off of your to-do list today. So I think you're really going to like these because there's all sorts of different kinds of spiritual practices. We're going to start with the practices of letting go, because practices of letting go help us actually engage better with God. So we're going to look at 3 of them today, real briefly, 3 spiritual practices that we see in the life of Jesus, and we'll look at some different spots in Gospel of Matthew that are all about training ourselves to let go of the things that get in the way of us and our faith, us and our relationship with God. So let's jump in. First one is this: practicing Sabbath helps us let go of life's ongoing hurry, so we can better engage with God. Did you know that Jesus actually doesn't want you to live a really hurried, burned out, rushed, stressful kind of life? He told us that. He promised us that. Check out Matthew chapter 11. In Matthew 10, Jesus is empowering the disciples and sending them out. Go do ministry. And then in Matthew 11, teaches us something really important we can't miss, otherwise we just become busy doers for God. Matthew 11:28, maybe you've heard these words. Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart. With me you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Doesn't that sound so refreshing? Doesn't that sound so different than how a lot of us grew up thinking about God and about religion. A lot of us think as soon as I decide to follow God, he's got a big old religious to-do list for me, and he's going to keep me busy. My Sundays are busier now, and he's got all these activities and to-dos for me. But notice Jesus says, come to me and I will give you a to-do list. I will give you religious rules. He says, I will give you rest. And I love that Jesus said this because he expected us to be weary and to be burdened. So when I feel that, maybe you feel some of that right now, I don't have to come to him ashamed of it. He says, no, I know. I knew this world is hard, pretty hard. I created it. I know there's free will and sin is broken. A lot of things that make you weary and burdened. And I want to give you rest. By the way, those two words, that word weary in the Greek really is about this idea of being weary just from my own constant spinning, my own vain efforts that I'm trying so hard. And the idea of burdened is having to carry the burdens of the brokenness in the world around me. And I don't know about you, I feel like I'm carrying more burdens than ever lately. So I need this. So Jesus says, bring your weariness and your burdens, and I'll give you my yoke. And I know we don't talk about yokes much anymore, except with our eggs. You're welcome. But the idea of yoke, if you remember back in the days, Little House on the Prairie, or you ever seen pictures or movies, think of like a big ox or a big horse, and they're pulling a really heavy piece of machinery or cart behind them, and they got this big old wooden thing around their neck, and that is called a yoke. And Jesus says, come give me that yoke. I'm going to give you my yoke, and it's light. It's light, and it's freeing. Jesus offers us himself and rest for our souls. I love how St. Augustine said it way back in the 1st century. For you have formed us for yourself, O God, and our souls are restless until we find rest in you. We need this, don't we? So many of us are suffering from this sickness. Well, not that sickness, the sickness of the soul, and it's called hurry. Hurry is really a sickness of the soul. It's different than just being busy. You know what being busy means. I got full schedule, a lot of activities. It's one thing to be busy, but being hurried is bringing busy to the next level. When I'm hurried, I'm so preoccupied that I'm unable to be fully present, that it causes me to be unavailable to people in my life and to God. Maybe people have told you that. You seem distracted. You seem like you're not all there. Being hurried is incredibly spiritually draining. I know the difference, by the way, of hurry and busy because I've experienced both. I've experienced both of those. And it's dangerous to us to live hurried, not necessarily because it's just going to make us renounce our faith and throw in the towel on God, although certainly that can happen, but it can cause us to become so distracted, so rushed, so preoccupied that we settle for a minimal or mediocre version of our faith. We settle for just skimming through life instead of actually living life and living the kind of life God wanted us to. Maybe this is why the idea of Sabbath made it into God's top 10. I've always found this so fascinating. In God's top 10 commandments, right there next to, do not lie, do not murder, do not steal or covet or have false idols, and remember to keep the Sabbath. And I believe that's the one of the 10 that we all kind of laugh a little at. A little old-fashioned there. I mean, you're not as busy back then as the rest of us are here in 2021. I mean, not that easy to have a whole Sabbath day, but nice suggestion, God. Thank you, but no thanks. But just let me ask you this real quick. Are we seeing the effects in our world of people ignoring the Sabbath? Are we seeing the effects of people living just burned out, rushed, going 100% of the time at full speed? Do we feel the effects of that? Do we see what it's doing to people's health and families, marriages? Do you feel it? Do you see the effects? Honestly, I've gotten to a place where I feel the effects when I'm not practicing Sabbath. I know when I'm doing it, and I need to get back on track kind of at the end of this past year. I let myself just get too hurried again. And Sabbath was starting to get bumped down on the priority list, but it's in God's top 10 for a reason. Practicing Sabbath is so key. And it doesn't mean we're not going to be busy necessarily. I mean, think about Jesus' life in the Gospels. That's a busy dude. He's got a lot of demands on him from a lot of people. But he never let his busyness turn into hurry, into something that, severed his connection with God, with the Father. And so that's why Sabbath, by the way, was God's idea from the start. You first hear about it all the way back in Genesis chapter 1 and 2. God creates the whole world, and then it says, and on the seventh day, he rested. God modeled Sabbath for us from the beginning. Then he commands it in his top 10 commandments. Then he reminds the Israelites of why Sabbath is so important, like in Deuteronomy 5. He says, remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand, with his outstretched arms. Therefore, the Lord God has commanded you to observe a Sabbath day. Here's what he's saying to them, what he's saying to you. He's reminding us that slaves don't get a Sabbath. Only free people do. You know, slaves back then, man, they worked 24/7, 365. Some of you go, amen, I know that feeling, right? But under new ownership, God's ownership, he says, hey, that's not how things work in my kingdom. I value Sabbath. And that's what he wants to give to you. And I know our culture values the hurry and the hustle, and we wear it as a badge of honor. People say, how you doing? I'm busy, man. I'm so busy. Life's crazy busy. And we can find ourselves getting enslaved to this hurry and hustle. And God says, no, in my kingdom, I value Sabbath. And so part of Sabbathing is remembering that my worth doesn't come from what I do, what I can produce for God. It comes from who I am, simply from who I am. That's why I love that Jesus says in John 15:15, by the way, says to his disciples, he says, I don't call you servants or slaves or workers or employees. He says, I call you friends. God wants you to know your value to him isn't about what you produce. You know, my kids' value to me, I don't love them because of what they do for me. I mean, I do wish they do more of their chores sometimes. That isn't what makes me love them. My friends, I'm not friends with them and love my friends because of what they can do for me. I know sometimes people fall into that, right? It's just because who they are, because our relationship. God uses Sabbath to remind me that's how my relationship with him is. That it's not about what I'm doing or not doing for him. It's my value comes from who I am in him. So, how are you going to practice Sabbath? I want you to pick today, what is your regular Sabbath going to be? What better time of year to pick it than right now for 2021? What day of the week is your Sabbath going to be? Remember, it's not just going to automatically happen. You got to be intentional with your time. The old saying, if you don't tell your time to go, others will be more than happy to do it. So what's your day? For me, my Sabbath day, it's not Sundays because, you know, I'm usually busy on Sundays doing my job that I love. So for me, actually almost my whole ministry career was Mondays. I protected it. I valued it. I was good at never looking at emails, really focusing on the family, focusing on God, focusing on myself. Recently, over this past year, we kind of at Newbreak kind of moved most of our staff Sabbath to Friday instead. And so as I'm readjusting to that, I'll be honest, last couple months of the year, I wasn't doing great at protecting it. I always had some work bleeding over into Fridays, but I really work hard to protect it. And I even apologize to people, hey, I do my best to get back to you quickly, but just know if you call me or email or text me on a Friday, yeah, I might not answer right away because I really want to protect my Sabbath, and I want to model that for you. So pick your Sabbath, and then here's some quick tips on how to do it. We don't just Sabbath, we say, finally, I get a 12-hour binge-watching marathon to watch, you know, an entire show on Netflix or whatever. You can pick other days to do that. Sabbath, it doesn't have to be entirely spiritual, like 12 hours of praying, but you do want to connect with God spiritually during it. It's not just don't work. It's trying to not think about work. You might have to turn off the email notifications on your phone. Here's what's fun, though. You can actually make a list of some of the things that you don't like doing, like laundry or grocery store trips or whatever. And you can say, you know what? I don't do that on my Sabbath day. If yours is Sunday, say, Saturday, I get all that stuff done. But I'm not going to let myself do that on a Sunday. That's how you take it seriously. And sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do on a Sabbath is just take a good nap. And you can tell your toddlers that I gave you permission to do that, and tell your boss that. But no, it's about regular Sabbath. It's about helping us let go of hurry so we can instead connect more with God and remind us that we're free in God. Now let's move on to the second practice, and it's closely related to that one. And this is something you could actually do daily. And again, I think you're going to love this one. So Jesus practiced this often, all throughout the Gospels. I'll show you one example. It's in Matthew 14, so a couple chapters later. And it goes like this in verse 13. When Jesus heard what had happened, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. Of course, that didn't work because hearing of this, the crowds followed him on foot from all the towns. So he had to do it again. In verse 23, after he dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. And later that night, he was there alone. Practicing solitude helps us let go of life's constant noise. And this is the Spirit's practice where all the introverts rejoice. My wife's going, yeah, speak more in solitude, right? Introverts are like, I love solitude. But silence and solitude are about making intentional time to be alone with God. Alone with ourselves, alone with God. But again, you got to be intentional about it, just like Jesus did. He had, you and I might feel like we got a ton of demands on us. People always want something from us. That's how Jesus was. But you see over and over, he's intentional to get away by himself. By the way, I love that he often did it in the water and in the mountains, right? As we just read. And if you're someone that's blessed enough to live in like San Diego, like I do, then you can do a lot of your Sabbaths in the mountains and on the water because we live right there. So you're blessed for that. Let me ask you this. Do you have an addiction to noise? Are you addicted to activity? Addicted to people? I'll be honest, I struggle with that. When I take StrengthsFinder, one of my top 5 on there is achiever. So I'm definitely wired of like, I just want to always be achieving and doing stuff. I do find energy from being around people. So those can be good things. People, noise, activities can be good things. They can energize you like they do me, depending on how you're wired up. But if I'm not careful, they burn me out. I get burnt out, even cynical, get kind of exhausted, become kind of no good to anybody, and definitely affects my faith. And even in this kind of pandemic season where we've been kind of forced to slow down a little bit, this hasn't been that easy for me. Instead, I feel even more urgency of, I'm not achieving enough for God. And so I've had to come back to this practice a lot. And there's this one little phrase in 2 different Psalms that I keep coming back to and praying. And so hopefully it's helpful for you as well. Psalm 46:10, be still and know that I am God. In Psalm 37:7, be still and wait patiently for God to act. Be still. And I keep coming back to that, saying, God, help me to be still. Maybe your biggest challenge this year is to stop living by the old cultural saying, don't just sit there, do something. And instead, start living by this. Don't just do something, sit there. Be still. Be still. Did you know Jesus used those same 2 words, be still? It's in a story where he's again on a boat with his disciples and huge storm comes. If you've ever been on the water when a big old storm comes, it's pretty scary. So the disciples are freaking out. Jesus over there sleeping. Seems like he doesn't care. They don't know what to do. They're overwhelmed thinking they're going to die. Jesus, wake up. You got to do something. Jesus gets up and he just says 2 words, be still. And then he drops his mic and then the storms are still. And so maybe in your solitude time, you can begin by praying, Jesus, I got a lot of storms going on in my life. They're freaking me out and I'm overwhelmed. So Jesus, speak those words to the storms in my life like you spoke, be still. Let him hear. I hope you hear him say those words into you. Be still. Be still. Why do we do this? Why is this an important spiritual practice? So we can be quiet long enough to hear from God, to let him speak into our thoughts, to be alone with ourselves and with him. And how do we do it? Again, you got to be really intentional. Pick a time of solitude, even daily. You could even start with 10 minutes a day. And maybe it's to start your day. Maybe it's at night to end your day and things are quiet. Maybe it's right after work. Maybe it's on your lunch break. But pick a time, pick a place. Again, you can do the mountains, the water, front porch, back deck. Go hide in your car and do it. Have that special spot in your home that's just for that, whatever it is, and just be alone and create mental, emotional, spiritual space for you to hear from God. That's what solitude helps us let go and do. One last one, real quick. One other way to let go so we can hear from God better, engage with him more, is practicing fasting. That helps us let go of distractions. Jesus did this often. We read in Matthew 4, says, after fasting for 40 days and for 40 nights, he was hungry. By the way, he was hungry. To me, that's the most Captain Obvious verse in the Bible anywhere. Really? You think he was hungry after 40 days? Don't worry. I'm not going to challenge you to go do a 40-day fast. Nobody wants to see you get that hangry. But fasting's so important. And it's often the most misunderstood one. So let's bring some clarity real quick. First is the why. Fasting is about letting go of things that become major distractions in my life. They can even be good things, Fasting isn't necessarily that they're evil things. You should give those up anyway. That can be good things, but they start to become things that I rely on, that I'm controlled by, that I'm obsessed with. If you're not sure what's controlling you, ask yourself this. What's the first thing I think of when I wake up? Is it, I can't wait to get that caffeine, can't wait to eat the food, can't wait to check my phone, can't wait to look at social media, can't wait to turn on the news? Maybe some of those things are starting to control you. And so fasting isn't about that. It's about trading in that, letting go of that so I can instead connect with God. So I don't just say, I better fast from my phone so I have more time for TV. Yeah, that's not all that helpful. About trading in something so I'm going to replace it with time with God. The other thing about fasting is it helps provide clarity and guidance and deeper connection for us with God. We talked about Sabbath being weekly and solitude being daily, and fasting would be occasionally, regularly, like situational. The Bible actually doesn't command us like how often to fast. Jesus just assumed we would do it. He says in Matthew 6, when you fast, here's a few tips on how to do it. And so the idea of fasting, the way we see it most often, like throughout the book of Acts and different times in Jesus' life, is right before people have a big decision to make or taking on a big kind of change in their life or really needing to reconnect with God. So I encourage you to use fasting in those ways. Second, the how. How do we do fasting? By the way, it doesn't always have to be about food. Let's talk about food for a second. Some of it is intentionally fasting from food. Not because it's bad, but it lets me replace the time I would have spent preparing the food, eating the food, and cleaning up after it for time with God. It's about reminding me that God ultimately sustains me even more than food does. And I know for some of you got health things like, hey, I can't just skip entire meals or, I have to keep blood sugar up and some of these things. And that's okay. Here's what's great. Bible isn't super legalistic about here's exactly what the right kind of fasting looks like and you have to follow these 10 rules to do it. You can be flexible. Whatever fasting helps you sacrifice and let go of something so you can replace it with something else with God. So I've done that. I've done fasting that might be no food for 24 hours, or sometimes I've done like only water and fruit, say for like 48 hours, but no other kinds of food. So you can decide to do that. You could give up certain kinds of food for a certain amount of time, fast from sugar, from salt, from whatever, maybe fast from caffeine. If you're going to do that, can you please just warn your family and friends ahead of time because they need to know that you're just not going to be in a great mood. Maybe it's fasting from alcohol. Well, anything that's starting to control you. By the way, you can fast from lots of non-food things, as I mentioned. A great one, especially this time of year, fasting from shopping. Online shopping. I love this idea. I learned this from someone else and they did this fast. They said, hey, for this entire month, I'm not going to buy anything except the bare essentials. So, if you're out of a certain toiletry that you really need, or of course, basic food at the grocery store, but wouldn't let themselves buy anything else besides that for a whole month. Wouldn't January be a great month for you to do that? Because, December's credit card bill is coming soon, right? Or what if you said between now and Easter, for 3 months, I'm not going to buy anything that isn't essential. Just a way to fast. Another great one, I remember as a kid, my dad did this one where he said, all right, for this season, no TV on Monday nights. Luckily, this was after Monday Night Football was over. Just kidding. But he's like, no TV Monday nights. And our family would usually sit around and watch the TV. And so I loved that time because at first I'm like, I'm so bored. What do I do? And then I started, I'd read, we'd play games of family, I'd get outside more. And that was cool. That was cool. And so if I were to apply that to also connecting with God in that time, it can be powerful. Maybe for you, it's fasting from something online, whether you tend to spend most of your time on social media or YouTube or WebMD or Google or whatever it is. Remember, it's not about that these are necessarily bad things. It's that they're things that start to control us and make us think we need them more than we need God. So fasting reminds us that God's all we need. That's what all of 3 of these practices do. They remind me that I can't hold on to God unless I let go of whatever it is for you. So which of these practices do you need to focus on and put into practice in your life this year? I mean, maybe you haven't yet seen what God could do in you, how deep your relationship with him could become until you've started practicing one of these. Maybe it's the thing he's waiting for and the thing you've been waiting for. I really encourage you to try them. Try all 3, see which ones connect, make adjustments as you need to. Let us know how we can help. We do want to give you a chance today to get to have a little bit of time and just kind of silence, kind of solitude with God as you watch, and we're going to celebrate communion together. But before we jump into that, I just really wanted to pray this passage over you that we read earlier, the Matthew 11:28, the weary and burdened one. I'm going to read it to you, though, in the Message translation. Just powerful. I pray every word of this passage will come true in your life this year. So if you want to close your eyes or just listen in, I pray this over you, Matthew 11:28. Are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. Lord Jesus, that is our prayer. That is our prayer. Help us, God, especially in a season where we can feel so burdened, so weary of all these things going on. Help us walk with you and learn to let go of the noise and the hurry and the distractions that we can do, as you promised right in this verse. Learn to live freely and lightly. Learn your unforced rhythms of grace. Learn how to find real rest for our souls. I pray that for every person listening in, God. May this be a year, we'll hopefully get other stuff done. We want to get done, achieve a few things, but let it be a year of real rest and engagement and connection with you. Oh, Jesus, we pray, bring us rest for our souls. You're the only one who can. So it's in your name that we pray. Amen.